The island of Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico it's a U.S. territory, and the Puerto Rican citizens are American citizens. They're not some sort of far-off, distant people. They're our countrymen. They're our fellow citizens, and what this country has done to them was barbaric, neglectful, and inhumane. And for a long time, I guess this presidential administration, Trump's administration, and government agencies were basically patting themselves on the back, saying, "Oh, about 16 to 60 people got killed when the hurricane hit." But that's not the case. What I want everyone to understand is a research team led by the scientists at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health did a survey to do an official death toll of the hurricane when it hit, and then the aftermath of when the hurricane hit. So basically what they did was they surveyed randomly chosen households and asked the occupants about their experience from this approach. They did this between September 20th to December 31st, and from what they gathered, around 4,645 excess deaths. They're rounding up to around 5,000. But the estimate it isn't as precise. They're still calculating more research and data. But the statistical term called for a 95% confidence interval, which basically encompassed a broad range from 800 to 8,500 deaths, and their figure for 4,645 lies near the middle of that range. So they're going to round it up to at least around 5,000 to account for some assumptions that they have made. And these findings were then made published by the New England Journal of Medicine. Around 3,299 households in Puerto Rico were selected when the scientists did the survey. And I want everyone to understand that when Puerto Rico was going through a quote-unquote reconstruction, a lot of that reconstruction activity was happening in gentrified areas and popular tourist locations, because you got to keep the economy going. But for the rest of the party island, where the working class families in Puerto Rico were living and trying to restart their lives after this devastating hurricane, most of them were going out without power, shelter, clean water, food, and medical treatment. Basically, think of a civilization regressing backwards to the Dark Ages, to where no clean water, and we all know what's in unsanitary water. There's bacteria, there's harmful toxins, and countless thousands of innocent American citizens were exposed to this, and it's outrageous that this actually happened. But As we're all enjoying our summer here in Chicago, I want everyone to understand that we're going to be entering into hurricane season again, especially for people who live on the East Coast, in the Gulf of Mexico, and some of the southern states. They're going to be hit again by these large storms, and scientists are still collecting data on these hurricanes that are going to be forming up. And some are theorizing, they're still collecting more research on this, but some are theorizing that we may actually have a category that will be larger than a Category 5. So that's something we have to deal with down the road. Guys, I know we got a few short minutes on this, but I want to open the floor, at least get some of your thoughts on the impact of these death counts and the very close hurricane season that we're going to be dealing with.
So to go to the methodology of the how they did this, it's a very common way of figuring out information like this when a lot of official information is unavailable. So imagine Chicago, there's a giant storm. Tons of trees get knocked down, so they just call random people throughout the city and say, "Hey, on your block, how many trees fell over?" They do that. You can get a very good estimation that's very accurate of how many trees fell down in the entire city. So it's a very similar process with Puerto Rico. Now, here's the issue of how the government did it. The government was like, unless the hurricane launched a tree on top of your car while you were driving it, it doesn't count as a hurricane-related death. So unless you were surfing the hurricane and got thrown out into the ocean, it's not a hurricane-related death. So what they don't count is for the hospitals that had people on life support who lost power and their backup generators ran out of power and then died. Those the government's like, no, those had nothing to do with the hurricane. In terms of raw number, they seem very confident that it's somewhere around 5,000. I'd like to remind everyone that on September 11th, about 3,000 people died, and we've now gone to war with the entire Middle East for decades, putting in trillions of dollars, millions of civilian deaths, thousands of our own deaths. In fact, the war in Iraq has only cost about, and when I say cost about, I mean 2,500 U.S. soldiers' deaths. So double the amount of people that have died in Iraq that are our soldiers, and you're getting the death toll that happened in Puerto Rico. You then go to the island that is then saddled with a huge amount of debt. At the same time, they use an excuse to basically install Wall Street hedge fund managers to run the island in the same way that Flint was run by the Schneider government by installing an emergency manager. They did a similar thing with them because Puerto Rico has been saddled with about $100 billion in debt while all this is happening. So now they've privatized a huge portion of the island to pay for it. So they've taken a tragedy and they've used it to steal the public resources of the people in that area and give it to private hands. Because from the perspective of people, Puerto Rico isn't a state, it's a territory. They send representatives to Congress, but they can't vote. They don't matter. Why would they care about that? So this is how it's working out. This is exactly how you'd expect it to act out when we have an economy that runs the way it does. So when we have people that are dying in hospital beds, places that are, the Army Corps of Engineers has already left the island because they're like, yeah, we did enough. We're pretty good. I mean, we haven't gotten everyone connected, but that's not our concern. We just want to get the nicer areas that are already, that have wealth and tourist availability to it.
Yeah. Lauren?
Well, it's hard to not want to feel enraged. I can feel my blood boiling. We've been covering Puerto Rico since this tragedy happened, and this administration, they have the blood of 5,000 people on their hands, American citizens, and this is something that we should all be very upset about, because if this is what we're willing to do to innocent people, when's the next time we're going to pull this again, And for, the horror stories that we've heard for people, that were cut off from the island who didn't have access to their friends and family here in the States, not being able to notify them if they were safe, if they were alive, stories of the morgues being completely full, just absolute horror. And for our administration to look at it and be like, are they really Americans? Who cares?
And
yes, yes, they are. These are human beings as well. And this is something that we need to be calling out as much as possible, because this is unacceptable.
I also want to say at a last point that the Trump administration actually used saying, oh, only 64 died, we did a great job. So they actually used this official number, which is about 1% of the actual number, as a means to brag how effective they were. And he was like, it's not my Katrina.
I just want to add, too, because I remember watching some coverage. This had to be like back in September, October. And they were talking to the head of, I can't recall the exact department, but they were talking about electricity and rebuilding and what percentage of the island would be completed. They were going like by certain deadlines. And I recall that they were planning that by the end of January, they were expecting to restore Puerto Rico up to 70%. Do we have any idea right now how much of the island has actually been restored? Because it is now June, and I feel like the death toll is still rising.
I don't know if we do know exactly how much of the island is fully restored with power and has those amenities. I think it's worth noting the motivations for official death count numbers to be low is obvious, right? We treat Puerto Rico like this pseudo part of the United States that we can use as a piggy bank for wealthy corporations and whatnot to basically avoid large tax payouts, and then keep the people of Puerto Rico under our thumb by not allowing them to take imported goods from any other country. It has to come from the mainland United States. At this point, Puerto Rico needs to become a state. The process for Puerto Rico to gain statehood needs to be initiated, and that's going to be, I think, the only real impetus to avoid this type of high-level mismanagement and misreporting and basically,
lack of accountability from people
and
that
human
could
rights
be
violations.
assisting with aid.
Yeah, and again,
It's like,
you
oh,
know,
well, they're not a state, so they're not our problem.
well, here's the thing, because you know, I don't know, this is going to be the final note on this story because you know there's going to be a follow through, and of course, with the hurricanes coming, you know, we need to understand that we need to hold things accountable. We need to hold this government accountable, and the people of Puerto Rico, they are U.S. citizens, and you know, we need them to be, you know, back on par. We need them to, you know, just we need to treat people with respect so that we can, you know, have them, you know, survive and thrive. And hopefully, the people of Puerto Rico will be able to get through this.